Now let's go to last and the worst team in the AFC West last year, and it was the Los Angeles Chargers. They were 5-12. Departure-wise, obviously lost head coach Brandon Staley. I mean, once like we said last year, for the shock that he was not fired at halftime of that Raider game where they got beaten like 70 to I forgot what. But so obviously he's gone. Lost a couple of running backs in Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly. And then, of course, also lost wide receiver Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And then tight end Gerald Everett, who was solid for them. And then also on the offensive line, lost Corey Linsley, their center. So that's a tough one. And then on defense, linebacker Eric Kendricks and cornerback Michael Davis were also gone for the Los Angeles Chargers. And then obviously addition-wise, head coach Jim Harbaugh from Michigan to be their head coach. And then in the free agency, grabbed running backs Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Brought in an old Chow favorite, wide receiver DJ Chark, who apparently may be starting. Take that good or bad for how their wide receiver room is. And then also brought in tight ends Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst. So once again, kind of showing the Jim Harbaugh ideology, building up the O-line and tight ends. They also brought in center Bradley Bozeman. So I'm assuming he will take over Corey Linsley's spot. And then on defense, took a couple gambles here. Edge rusher Bud Dupree. Obviously, a couple years removed from that knee injury, so maybe they're hoping to get something more out of him. And then linebackers Denzel Perryman, who I think it's his second stint with the Chargers.
Yeah.
Yep. So welcome back, Denzel. And then Troy Dye, and then also brought in cornerback Christian Fulton, who I thought was pretty solid had some moments in Tennessee. And then lastly, draft-wise, in the first round, grabbed Joe Alt out of Notre Dame, and then wide receivers Lad McConkey out of Georgia in the second round. And then Jim Harbaugh went and got one of his Michigan guys and linebacker Junior Colson in the third round. So obviously a lot of shuffling for this this Chargers organization over this offseason in not just personnel but coaching wise. So what are your thoughts and expectations on year one of the Jim Harbaugh experiment?
I think it's pretty clear what Jim wants to do offensively. They had a key moment there with that fifth pick. Do you go receiver? Do you take somebody like a Malik Neighbors, or do you go offensive line? It was the same predicament that the Bengals found themselves in when it was Penei Sewell versus Jamar Chase. The Bengals, they went Jamar Chase. The Chargers, they're going Joe Alt. They're going the offensive line route. And I like it because it gives them, if Joe Alt lives up to the potential that people were talking about him as when he was in the draft process, it gives them, assuming health to Rashawn Slater, arguably one of the top tackle duos in the league, which I think is a really great thing always to have, because you can keep your quarterback upright. That can be deadly when it comes to the running game, because it enables you to run to both sides, especially if you can really get some solid guard play out of Zion Johnson and Trey Pipkins this year. And so that's, really dynamic for the offense. I like that. Obviously, they lose out on Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly. Josh Palmer's the receiver they have. So they lose those two running backs. But honestly, I think that's fine. Austin Eckler wanted to get paid, and at his age and all that kind of stuff, it's just not worth it. They were using him as like a full workhorse, but that's just not the kind of guy he is, especially given his physical build. He's a very small running back. So I like the additions they brought in of Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Jarrett Patterson. You draft Kamani Vidal. None of them are really going to be like an elite RB1 kind of guy, but you just use RB by committee. If J.K. Dobbins is healthy, who knows? Maybe he can kind of get some of that, rookie season juice that has been missing over the course of the last few years because of the injuries. I don't know if he's ever going to get back to, 6 yards per carry or whatever he was averaging, something electric his rookie year. But maybe he can be a nice contributor. Gus Edwards looked great for the Ravens the last couple of years when he was healthy and playing, and he can be kind of your grinded out, main running back. You mix in Kamani Vidal as kind of a young guy, see what he has. And then Jarrett Patterson, another guy in Washington who had a lot of, moments, flashes, potential, could have been a workhorse, kind of, never truly became one. So I just feel like you have a lot of options there at the running back room to run behind this offensive line. So I'm excited for that. Even though on paper, it's not like the sexiest of names. The only thing that I really disliked about their offseason was I didn't feel like you had to let Keenan Allen go. It didn't feel like in terms of compensation, they really got anything crazy. And it feels like based on their receiver room, it's tough, right? Because they draft Quentin Johnson last year, the first round pick. I was very high on him. All reports as of right now indicate that he's not a starter, that he is behind DJ Chark, like you said. And so it just seems like that's kind of a lost cause right there. You don't really get back anything on your investment. I'm still hoping that Quentin Johnson can turn it around, but if he's not able to beat DJ Chark in a second year for a job, considering the state of this overall receiver room, it's probably not looking great. I'm excited for Ladd McConkey and Josh Palmer because I think both of them could have really solid years, especially with Justin Herbert behind center. But it just really does seem like if you still had Keenan Allen, this receiver room would have felt a lot more strong because you have your go-to guy, the guy that Herbert already has the chemistry with, and then you've got Palmer, you've got McConkey, you've got Chark, you've got Johnson, you got some other just young options around Keenan Allen that you could have made it work with. And although Ladd McConkey is kind of slated as a slot receiver, the guy's so fast that I think you could put him outside with Keenan in a 2 wide receiver set or 3 wide receiver set, and he would have been able to make that work. And then obviously one day, you can mix them both around. You could put Keenan outside sometimes, you could put him in the slot, and it would have just given you a really dynamic duo there of those two receivers and what you could have done this season with them. So that's the only thing I dislike about their offseason. I think it's a building year. They were 5-12 last season. They're just trying to build the team up, similar to what we talked about Sean Payton. Jim Harbaugh's trying to build the team up in his image defensively. I'm hoping that this team can be better than they've been over the last era with Staley, because he was a defensive coach, and in terms of names, they've got a lot of big names on this defense. You've got Derwin James, you've got Asante Samuel Jr., you've got Khalil Mack, you've got Joey Bosa. You've got star power, right? You add Christian Fulton, you add Denzel Perryman, you add some of these other guys that can hopefully kind of fill in some of the gaps. And I don't know, it just seems like in terms of the stars that they do have, obviously the NFL is not it's not like the NBA where you can have 1 or 2 stars that can kind of overcome weaknesses easily, but it does seem like this team, assuming health, because once again, health has been a big issue for them, for Joey Bosa, for Rashawn Slater, for a lot of these guys. Assuming health, I'm really hoping this defense can just be even an average defense in the league, because they have the names to do so. They have the names to be really disruptive. And if they can just be average, I think that this team can make a significant jump from 5 wins to an 8, 9, 10, who knows what win team, because last year we thought it felt like the Chargers were positioned to be the second best team in this division for the last couple of years, and they just never truly lived up to it. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with the Chargers this year. I don't have crazy high expectations, but I do really believe that in terms of the talent, despite the offseason they had and some of the key pieces they lost, they still have a lot of big name players that should be key contributors. And if they can stay healthy, I think they could be a potential wild card challenging team. It just depends on if certain key positions like the wide receiver room can step up and if everybody else can stay healthy.
Yeah, my main concern is more the defense. Even some of those pieces, especially depth, though, because defense, it feels like, and I know you mentioned injuries to the Chargers, but man, they got to hope for basically almost a perfectly healthy season on defense, because like you mentioned, those stars outside of them, and no offense to these other guys, it's just I'm not seeing a lot of impact players, especially interior, which was our worry with Brandon Staley, and it wasn't really something that it seemed like they resolved. In terms of size, the run defenses last few years has not been great, and that's been a big reason why. And then usually they still kind of have kind of more of the speedy linebackers and Perryman and Henley, as opposed to someone that can kind of fill in the run game, which, like we mentioned, Kansas City, we know Raiders, most of the teams, and even within their own division, at least are somewhat balanced in the run game, especially in recent years. So, yeah, and then cornerback room outside of Asante Samuel Jr. I know I mentioned I like Christian Fulton, but even then, he's spotty. Then after him, usually you want your third, fourth corner to be contributing, and still a lot of question marks is there. And just who knows what really we're going to see out of the defense. And one thing we'll know on the offense too, which could be a bad thing, maybe it's a good thing. I'm always questioning a little bit of the Greg Roman offense, especially in the passing offense. As we saw back in Baltimore, is always very simplistic and not very intuitive. And but granted, he's always had a very solid run game, even without a mobile quarterback, just in terms of basic run concepts. And hopefully, having a viable run game and maybe play action will just make the world easier for everything else. And maybe this whole wide receiver ordeal won't be as big of a deal because that's kind of, if we're talking about how Jim Harbaugh trying to build this team in his image, very much how his Michigan team was. Once again, this is NFL, not college, so may not be as easy to get away with that, at least early on. But do like at least building the structure of the team out. So even if, like you said, this year's maybe let's just be better than we were last year, it seems like they're on the right track.